You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This isn't a blood hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to episode 238 of the Batman Book Club. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer, and this is episode 238. Didn't happen. This wasn't planned. Just so happens 200 episodes ago, exactly, my guest was on this show. He's a comic book writer, special guest returning to the show since 2021 in January. Holy crap! It's writer Scott Beatty. Scott, thanks for coming back to
Hey
the
Ryan,
podcast.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's
nuts.
nuts.
Centennial. Wow.
It's how about that? It's funny coincidences, but then it's also that's more fun to me to think about is 200 episodes ago, rather than the almost 4.5 years ago was the last time I spoke to you. Like
I'm
it's
trying to
kind of
remember
crazy.
where I was 4.5 years ago.
I know it's all just like it's all a blur. It's a bummer that I haven't, talked to you since then. I had you back on here since then, but I mean, this was something honestly back when I first, because you reached out to me. You're the one that reached out to me, in my earlier younger days back, 2020, 2021, and we were talking and we talked to your Nightwing, Robin, Batgirl Year One series, all of them lovely. Highly encourage anybody to pick them up and read them if they haven't. But I was like, man, he did the comic adaptation of Batman Begins.
I
I
did.
really want
I
to
did.
pick his brain
And it
on
nearly
Batman
killed
Begins.
me.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, that's part of the story. I'm sure we'll get to it.
Yeah, I think I mean, the question I need to ask is, Scott, are you ready to begin?
I am.
Okay, good, great. Yeah. So Batman Begins. You're the only Batman movie, comic adaptation, live action author that's still around because, as everybody knows, Denny O'Neil, the late great Denny O'Neil, did the first four,
That's right.
before Batman Begins, and then you've also done the last Batman live action adaptation comic. They
Yeah.
didn't do one for Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, Batman vs Superman, The Batman, Justice League. I mean, I guess I can count in there too. So, we're gonna put you up on this pedestal here. Like,
Aw.
I've got 1,000 questions for you, but let's start
It's
because it's
it's
an
one of
origin movie.
I
Let's
was
start
just
with
gonna
the
say, Ryan,
origin.
it's one of three movie adaptations that I wrote for DC. One was in my name, one I ghost wrote,
Oh,
and the other one was canceled by the celebrity star. Uh,
ah.
17 pages in, and I can talk about that later on too. But
Okay, I was gonna say, are any of those okay? So let's start with the one that did happen.
hmm.
Which one? Shame on me, I didn't do my
Well,
homework.
Batman Begins, of course.
Oh, that one, just that one.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
not just that one, but I didn't know if there was an additional. Can you mention the others?
yeah, yeah. The one I ghost wrote was Snakes on a Plane,
Oh
which
my God.
Wildstorm produced, and I ghost wrote it for Chuck Dixon, and Chuck outed me a few years ago.
Uh,
Said that I was the one who actually did the writing on that. So it's public knowledge now. And
okay.
the third was a collaboration with Chuck and Butch Geis, my partner on the Ruse comic series for CrossGen Comics.
Hmm.
We were working on the Wild Wild West adaptation, the film starring Kevin Kline and Will Smith, and
Yeah.
we were 17 pages in of script, and I know that Butch, I think, had completed a couple pages of art when Will Smith pulled the plug because he did not want his likeness in a comic book
Hmm.
for whatever reason. So we
Yeah.
were paid for our work happily, but
Yeah.
a chance to finish it. And the script was it was fun. The movie, wasn't all that,
I never saw it because I had no interest.
well, famously, it had a giant mechanical spider
Hmm.
that Warner Brothers, for some reason, was desperate to include. because it goes back to the Superman movie that was supposed to star Nicolas Cage. And I
Yeah.
believe that in some iteration of the script, I'm not sure if it was Kevin Smith's or somebody else's, Superman would have fought a giant spider. And I think, I mean, if I'm misremembering, in the Flash movie from a couple years back, didn't
Yep.
when they go through the multiverse, didn't Nicolas Cage, wasn't he fighting a big spider?
You are
Hey,
correct.
Superman, yeah. So
Yeah.
they finally got that scene, which famously has been around. But
Yeah.
yeah, the Wild Wild West version was not a huge hit, but I think it's on TNT like every other day. At least it
Yeah.
was
It's
for a
just
while. So
it's like it's a daily thing anymore.
yeah,
But wow,
it's
that's
watchable and it's fun,
interesting.
but it's not
Yeah.
it's not high art.
I've wondered with that, because there's questions sometimes when they've done some of these adaptations and like currently the Batman '89 comic that Sam Hamm and Joe Quinones is doing and stuff. And sometimes the likeness rights comes into question when some people don't look like they really do. And I've just always wondered, not with any agenda, just out of curiosity of like, hey, Will, why wouldn't you like that?
Yeah, I don't
Just
know. I
curious,
mean,
you
if
know?
anybody could pull it off, and he did in the art that I saw, was Butch Guice. I mean, he could
Yeah.
do, photorealistic likenesses. And, there are certain artists that are go-to guys for stuff like that. I can think of friend Gordon Purcell, who did a ton of Star Trek because he could
Hmm.
draw Shatner,
Yeah.
in a way, a comic book way that looked like Shatner.
Hmm.
So, there are guys that can play to that. But I don't know. I think it boiled down to the branding of Will Smith
Yeah.
and maybe a lack of explicit control that Will Smith was not willing to give up at that point. So
All right. Well,
yeah.
I don't have him coming on this show that I know of, so I won't get to ask him. But maybe if somehow I ever get, one question, I'm like, why'd you cancel the Wild Wild West comic book?
Exactly. I mean,
Everybody wants to know.
a 17-page payday wasn't bad, but I wanted the
Yeah.
64-page payday.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. As for, let's see, Batman Begins. So this is a um whole world. So the comic came out 20 years ago because the movie came out 20 years ago. But let's start way
Dear
back
God,
to
20.
when,
Wow.
um, let's start to like how you got involved, when you first heard about it, like all of that good stuff.
So I really like my first big job at DC around the same time, actually a little later than I started on the Secret Files.
Hmm.
And that's where I kind of broke into DC editorial. But almost simultaneously, because I was doing a lot of Secret Files work, uh, licensed book editor Steve Corte hired me to write the first Batman Ultimate Guide, which was, very research intensive. I mean, it's the first, Batman encyclopedia since the ones that Michael Fleischer did back in the 70s.
Mm.
And this one is like fully illustrated, the whole DK treatment with cutaway drawings of the Batcave, the Batmobile, the Batplane, all of that stuff. So I did that around 2001. So that was the first, and then it was followed in short order by Superman, and then JLA. Catwoman was in there. Wonder Woman, I think, came before, maybe after JLA and before Catwoman. So I'd done a bunch of these. And I worked well with Steve and his assistant then, Jay Gardner. And when it came time to do Batman Begins, they gave it to Jay Gardner and Steve because the materials were coming from Christopher Nolan and that whole production team. I think it's Memento. No, not Memento. Syncope, is that their? I
Oh
can't remember
yeah.
their
Yeah.
production
Yep.
company.
Yep.
But so getting all of that material meant that I had two jobs. The first was writing the comic adaptation, and the second was writing the visual guide,
Hmm.
the hardcover, for the film. And I think that the reason why I got to do both was because the script was held so tightly that they didn't want too many hands
I'm
reading it and looking
shocked.
at it. Yeah,
Shocked Christopher Nolan was holding tightly.
absolutely. So I had to sign $1 million NDA
Hmm.
just for the comics adaptation, and I think it covered all ancillary materials too. So it included the book as well.
Hmm.
So every piece of Batman Begins that I looked at, I wasn't allowed to talk about, and I did to my wife,
Hmm.
So, I mean, there's
They've
one
got to
person who,
know
yeah, I mean,
your
she
spouse.
got to know everything.
Yeah.
But I also cautioned her that if we talked about it on the internet or anyplace else, that we did not have $1 million
Yeah.
to reimburse. So, working on those two projects simultaneously, I had access to a script, and it was an early draft of the script. It was also
Hmm.
an unfinished draft, which made my job so hard
Yeah.
because there were things in it that weren't quite finished. I knew the conceit of who the villain really was early on, but I don't think that the ending was quite worked out. And there were some set pieces and the action stuff that wasn't quite finished. So I think when you read my comics adaptation, you could see that the Tumblr chase scene that ends up on a rooftop um,
Hmm.
was kind of truncated because I don't think that was completely worked out whenever I scripted it. And when you're doing a comics adaptation, also you have to you have to cut things.
Yeah.
So I was trying to like read it and say, well, what's important to the final story, and what can the reader see? What's necessary to tell a complete story. So it got to the point where I broke ranks a little, and I reached out to David Goyer, the screenwriter. Um, I had his email, and David was also doing, I think, JSA books and stuff for
Hmm.
DC at the time. So, I felt like we were peers, even
Yeah.
though, in
Yeah.
Hollywood. I'm like, David, can you help me out? Can you tell me what's going to happen, or can you send me, a more current version of the script? And his NDA was, even bigger and more rock solid than mine. And he was like, I'm sorry, I can't help you out. So,
Yeah.
um,
Oof.
yeah, yeah. So, I was getting the script kind of piecemeal and trying to, get pages up because we were under the gun in terms of the deadline for Killian Plunkett to illustrate it. And finally, towards the end of scripting, I had to go to DC's offices in Manhattan and get the most current version of the script, which was, I had to sign for it. It was handed to me, and then I
Hmm.
had to work in what was the Clark Kent conference room. And they had, several conference rooms, but this one had a life-size Clark Kent who was bent over reading a copy of the Daily Planet. And so Clark and I sat and worked on it. Uh, Geez, I think I did it over 2 days, and from morning, from opening until closing, and then I had to hand it back over to then DC President Paul Levitz. So it was the chain of custody was pretty secure. So I
Oof.
couldn't leave the room without the script being secure. And at the time, when I say it nearly killed me, I had like the mother of all respiratory infections. Um,
Ugh.
the only time I've ever been sicker was with COVID, at the start of COVID, when
Oh,
I was
dang.
coughing up blood at the end. But
Oh my
I,
gosh.
I was double fisting Starbucks tea and then typing on a laptop, reading the script, and trying to be as productive as I could. But I'm coughing my brains out. And when I went home, I lived in Macungie, Pennsylvania, which is kind of like Lehigh Valley, close to New Jersey. So it's about an hour and 15 minutes from my then condo to parking on 54th and Broadway. But I
Hmm.
have to go across the George Washington Bridge, and go through New Jersey. But I was coughing so hard on the GW Bridge that I nearly blacked out. I mean, I browned out,
Jeez.
and I was like, "Oh God!" And I, swerved
Yeah.
out of traffic, and I thought this better be worth it in the end. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's not just figure of speech, because you mentioned to me when we were emailing back and forth that it almost killed you. It's like, no,
yeah, yeah,
literally, it almost did.
yeah. And I
Oh
mean,
my
and
God.
it was just very hard navigating all of the rules because
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan didn't want it out in the world, and I'm trying to do a faithful comics adaptation
Sure.
that is faithful to the script, the dialogue, but also to the ending of the film. And I don't think the ending was quite worked out completely, when I got to it. So, I mean, in hindsight, I think that what I did was pretty faithful. But some, like I said, some of the action set pieces are shortened because I didn't know
Sure.
the full picture.
Yeah. I mean, but so that's already like, wow. Because especially now knowing, because some of us, people that listen to this, they are like me. We're nerds. We love to know the behind the scenes as much as we can. We've watched the the bonus features of Batman Begins for 20 years now, hearing that Suits had to come to Nolan's garage and read the script in his garage. So it's like it goes way back of he's very secretive on his script. But in reading this, without knowing those stories, like I just kind of felt in rereading this now that it's because you're condensing a what 150 page script, 140 page script
Yeah,
to
probably. Like,
70 comic book pages.
yeah.
Okay, I just assume, well, stuff just has to be condensed then. So the action scene isn't going to be as long as the movie. I didn't think it was because, certain portions still weren't worked out. And I was aware of this in the sense of like Denny O'Neil, he was pretty open about working on that 89 adaptation and how that was very under the gun, down to the wire because, they didn't have an ending and those stories have been said. So he didn't know what to do. So there's
Right.
portions of the comic that are different than the movie and such. So I was very much wondering, I was going to ask you those questions too. If that was similar, it doesn't sound like as chaotic, but it seems like it was still there
I
of
mean,
portions not worked out.
even maybe not the complete final script. I mean, it was
Hmm.
brilliant. I mean,
Yeah.
it shows in the film. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's the best Batman adaptation to date, and I'll wrestle anybody who says otherwise. And and I like the Batman with Robert Pattinson, but
Uh-huh.
I think they really captured the mood of everything. And having Chicago stand in for Gotham was an
Yeah.
interesting choice because it wasn't just a rehash of Tim Burton's Batman,
Yeah.
which is one of my favorites too. So,
Hmm.
I mean, it was a pleasure reading and working from it. So, the problem for me was I didn't know, I didn't know the blank spaces in it, and so when I'm writing the script and you're writing it from page one, it's hard to know how much time to pay for each one. So my comics adaptation opens up with like three widescreen shots of like the bats,
Yeah.
and that's like described in the script for a couple pages. And so I tried to condense it to one, but in hindsight, I'm like, well, I've got to get rid of that. But then I've
Hmm.
got to get to the scene where young Bruce Wayne is playing with Rachel and falls down the well and, breaks his leg. And then there's bats. And, like that's a formative scene as much in the film as, going to the opera and
Hmm.
having his parents killed on the way home, in Crime Alley or, whatever,
Yeah.
substituted for it in the film version. So, just kind of making time for all that and trying to get the real nuggets of good dialogue because it was filled with it.
Yeah.
Uh, maybe, trying to imagine Michael Caine speaking Alfred dialogue with a little bit of Cockney.
Well,
Um,
now it's ingrained in our memories,
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, I can
absolutely.
imagine at the time be like, how is he gonna sound? And now he
Yeah.
hangs on to some of those words. It's like, like I know it's Dark Knight Tangerine is one that everybody links to. But now even with Sir and Master Bruce and never, like it doesn't begins. That one is just it's ingrained in my brain for the rest
Yeah.
of my days. When for time period here? So when did you start working on it then? Not like
Oh
day,
God.
but
So I
like
mean, if the film came out in 2005, I mean, it was a real short window, and
okay.
if I'm recalling correctly, I didn't do the visual guide until after the comics adaptation was done. And I think that the reason why they offered me that was because I had already had access to the material. So it
Yeah.
was just one less person that they'd have to, sign the NDA.
Yeah.
So I was working on the script minus the visuals. And the way things worked with DK was the DK designers in England would design the spread for, each page spread
Hmm.
and with all the art put in, and then they put in dummy text, like Latin dummy text
Yeah.
blocks for where I had to write. So I knew exactly how many words to write for, A Night at the Opera or, Rachel
Yeah.
Dawes and that sort of thing. And then I just, filled in the text and then I got to see the visuals of what things look like after that. So, that's the problem with like movie adaptations. Sometimes you don't have access to what, the characters look like or, maybe the special effects. It's funny. I was a comics reader when Star Wars came out in '77, and
Hmm.
I bought the comics adaptation. And ironically, I didn't see the film until after I had read the comic, and I was in the hospital for pneumonia for a week. So, like, my
Jeez.
brothers and my friends all got to see it before me. So, the thing about the comics adaptation, and you can really tell this in the oversized Treasury edition that Marvel released,
Hmm.
the artist Howard Chaykin at the time when he was drawing Star Wars, he kind of drew spaceships like the 1950s. even though he knew what a Star Destroyer looked like, but he had speed lines and like, jet contrails coming out of the back of it, like it was zooming
Yeah.
around, not like these monoliths, rolling across the screen in the original. And of course, the comics adaptation also has Biggs Darklighter, who was cut from the final version, and it doesn't have the old Irish Jabba the Hutt or the worm Jabba the Hutt, but it has the character that we came to know as Yak Face from the action figures as Jabba the Hutt. So like just seeing all the differences
Yeah.
because I'm sure like they got lots of stills from the movie and then just extrapolated what they thought it would look like laser blasts look like beams, not like these short bursts like we got in the film, like that really changed how we look at sci-fi special effects.
Hmm.
So I
Wow.
had no visuals. I only had the script, but I had written Batman before, so I kind of I kind of knew
Sure.
yeah, I kind of knew what to do in terms of theme, and I'm sure Killian had access to the visuals, but by the nature of his NDA, he couldn't share them with me. So I'm writing a script with my collaborator, so I'm only doing the words, and he's got visuals, and he can't share them with me. So we
Wow.
were, I mean, I was, double blind, and he was able to pick up and then kind of mesh it together. And I think Killian did a great job, but
Yeah.
it was a rush job. I mean, we had to do it very quickly.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Did you get started in like late 2004? You
Oh
think?
God, I
Like
mean,
not
I'd have
looking
to,
day and month, but like, is
yeah,
it,
I'd have to
or was
look
it
back.
all?
I don't,
Okay.
I've saved pretty much everything I've ever worked on,
Nice.
and that's why I'm able to like go back and in the Nightwing Year One hardcover, the 20th
Hmm.
anniversary edition that came out last year. We had 50 pages of art and emails uh, back and forth with Chuck and me and the editor Matt Idelson, and I was surprised because I found the original proposal, and we had Speedy and Kid Flash in it, and they never showed up in the final
Yeah.
product. But it just kind of shows you like how things change over
Yeah.
time. But I always keep the correspondence, and I keep every draft I've worked on. So, assuming that it survived all the various Macintosh downloads from one
Yeah.
computer to the next over the years. But I'm thinking I remember it being cool. So I think it was fall,
Okay.
maybe fall 2004. I know that the lead time between writing it, finishing the book, and then I got to screen the movie at Philadelphia, Wizard World Philadelphia in the following summer when it came out. They took a bunch of DC staffers and VIP guests on a bus from Wizard World Philadelphia to the local IMAX.
Wow.
I had DC staffers asking me questions about it, and I'm like, it's the NDA was basically locked in until the movie was out.
Uh-huh.
So because that movie showing was opening the same night, I couldn't talk about it until after everybody saw the movie, and then I could talk freely.
And then it was just, blah, finally, let me tell you a couple things.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was like holding it in completely. I just
Yeah.
have to say Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah. uh, so you mentioned Killian Plunkett.
Mhm.
I'm not familiar outside of this, what he's done, and then once I'll look, I'll be like, oh yeah, duh, oh yeah, duh. But man, I was wondering, that's why I kind of came back around to it a couple times of your guys' timetable here, because I am curious of how much under the gun like a project like this, and I would feel because, art like drawing takes longer than writing. Um, and some of his visuals here match up really well, as much as Bruce overhearing Rachel and Carl talking and the
Yeah,
hoodie he's got on and everything. It's like that looks like it does in the movie.
yeah,
Something
yeah,
when the Alfred in the Batcave is testing out the cowl with the bat, what Bruce is wearing, that's exactly what he's wearing in the movie. So it's like
yeah,
some of these really small details that in a way kind of don't matter. It's like that
yeah.
matches up with the movie. So I've really wondered.
I think the first two reels of the film
Mhm.
were pretty much set in stone. I think
Okay.
the final act, the final third, because there's a lot happening going back and forth between what was it the district of Gotham, the Barons or whatever it was called,
Mhm.
that Scarecrow had unleashed the fear gas in, and then
Oh,
the
in
final.
Arkham and the
Well, yeah, Arkham,
Narrows.
but also like just that one neighborhood that was kind of
The
like
Narrows,
yeah,
yeah.
the slummy kind of neighborhood. The Narrows, that's it. Um, That and the conceit that they were going to use the weapon on the water system and have everything erupt in order to aerosolize the fear gas and like kind of destroy Gotham, like have Gotham tear itself apart.
Hmm.
That thing happening, and then what finally happens with Ra's and Batman on the train, I don't think was locked in because the way we had to do it was I had to write pages and then sort of like lock them in, and then send them to Killian to DC, and then DC sent them to Killian. So he was working on it concurrently. So I never had a finished script, like a full 64, 72 page script that was done that I could go back to and say, oh, you know what? I missed this little character nuance where, Rachel looks at him a certain way. Like I had to just, keep doing the math in my head where if it was a 150-page script, then
Yeah.
2 to 3 pages for comic. So of those 2 to 3, can I condense or do I have to cut? And so, I would work on about 8 pages and then say, okay, this is final, and then send them off to Jay Gardner at DC, and then Jay would forward it to Killian. So it was a matter of keeping Killian fed with art pages to work on, and then keeping up on my deadline.
So it's funny that you bring that up. I'm blanking on the name of the episode, but how the water, the vaporizer, whatever. I don't know if you'd ever come across how similar that plot point is from an episode of the animated series where the Scarecrow did a similar thing. And I
Right, right.
always forget which episode that is, and it's like I don't care because
Probably
it's a
something
great idea.
Fear Factor or The Wages
Yeah.
of Fear or something
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. And it was kind of like a little mind blowing of like, I wonder if they were inspired by the animated series. I don't know. I don't but no, I don't know. That's just what, flipped the switch in my brain as you were mentioning that. It's like I'm curious if he knew if you'd seen that episode, connected the dots, or wondered, oh, that's pretty
Yeah,
similar.
I didn't connect it at the time. I mean, I've seen most or
Yeah.
all of the animated series, but the hard thing for scripting it was everything was great,
Hmm.
and like the extended scenes when Bruce goes to meet who he thinks is Ra's for the first time, and then the sword fighting on the
Yeah.
frozen lake, and like just all of this beautiful stuff that you want to include, not knowing that the back end or the back 2/3, then he has to go back to Gotham and then be Batman, and then we've got to introduce Scarecrow, and then the plot thickens, and then like all this stuff. So there's all these great action set pieces like in any Christopher Nolan film, but you
Yeah.
know translating some of that and trying to get the same kind of kinetic energy
Hmm.
that's on screen and then in a comic book page. I mean,
Yeah.
scripting a car chase in comics is really hard, And then it's like, well, wait, it's not just on the street; they're on a roof. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm like, how do I do this?
That's
Like,
I'm glad we went here because I that was a portion of my questions I wanted to ask you too was just you as a fan at this point. There'd been a gap of a live action Batman movie. There's been some false starts and rumors and scripts in that 97 until it was greenlit and happening beginning 2003. Um, like what was as a fan, were you really excited that we were just getting a new Batman movie?
I mean, yeah, for me, I mean,
Yeah.
Batman's always been one of my favorite characters. He's never been number one. I mean,
Hmm.
Dick Grayson's always number one.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
know
that
it
makes
seems
sense.
it seems upside down, but I mean, it's Dick Grayson gets to be in the Batcave,
Hmm.
and every sidekick is the wish fulfillment for the young reader. But I had the good fortune in '97 of being invited to a screening of what was it, Batman and Robin,
Hmm.
or yeah, Batman and Robin. No,
Yeah.
yeah, Batman and
97
Robin.
was Batman and Robin. Yep.
Yeah, okay, Batman and Robin. Um, and um, awful. I
Yeah.
mean, the film is it's a hot mess. Like the stuff that Tim Burton had established just kind of spiraled downward in terms of the campiness.
Hmm.
I mean, I love Joel Schumacher falling down. I hate his Batman.
Yeah.
2 words, bat nipples.
Yeah. You're not even forever.
Yeah,
You didn't
yeah.
even like forever?
Um,
Completely fine. I'm not going to push here or argue at
I
all with
mean,
you about
yeah. I
anything.
mean, I like Val
Just curious.
Kilmer. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. I think by Batman Forever, it's actually starting with Batman Returns,
Hmm.
it became less about Batman and more about the villains, and then the pair of villains
Yeah.
conceit every single film kind of like just took away from Batman time. But for Batman and Robin, I'm sitting in a theater and I was working at Wizard Entertainment at the time. I think I had just taken over Toy Fair magazine, or actually launched Toy Fair magazine, and a bunch of Wizard staffers were invited to go see Batman and Robin with DC comic staffers. And I was sitting in the theater, I'm seeing Bane for the first time, and he's just this hulking idiot, like Bane.
Yeah.
And Poison
Boom.
Ivy is, she's Uma Thurman is vamping it up, and the Bat credit card, and every
Yeah.
terrible, awful thing. And I turned and I saw Denny, and I had never met Denny in person yet because I
Hmm.
hadn't transitioned yet to writing for DC. And I see Denny, and he's just sinking lower, lower seat. So the fact that he was able to write all of the movie adaptations, and I'm
Hmm.
sure that he was probably cringing because so much of Batman is from stories that he established.
Yeah.
He's the father of the modern Batman.
Yep.
But just to see Denny like just slinking and collapsing into the seat was,
Yeah.
I don't know. I realized that it's not just me, that
Yeah.
the film was pretty bad. So
Yeah.
I mean, with that being the low bar, finding out that, and I had seen Memento
Hmm.
before, Christopher Nolan, so I thought, well, this was a pretty cool film.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? And really, 20 years ago, before the Marvel universe, um, we had nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
So, when I read the script, I'm like, wow, this is really, it's a serious Batman. There's no campiness. There's no Robin. The origin is done faithfully and kind of extended, like Bruce's, however long, decades long sojourn around the world to become master detective, master martial artist, etc. Like all that was there. So, David Goyer gets a lot of credit because, he wrote the script with Nolan's brother, um,
I see. I'm get confused on this some
Jonathan.
because I think he gets on Begins, he gets a story credit with Christopher, and
Yeah,
then the script is just Christopher. I don't know. And then it's Jonathan and Christopher for Dark Knight and Rises,
yeah.
but
But
Goyer's
David
always
Goyer,
there with story, I think.
yeah,
Always gets
Goyer
story
and the
credits.
Nolans were together. I think, and Goyer
Yeah.
did most of the heavy lifting on the script. Even I think the story may have been plotted out by
Yeah.
the Nolans.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, internet, don't hate me.
Nah,
In 20
I'm
years,
wrong.
give me a
I've
little
already
grace.
said probably five things that are incorrect here. I'm not trying to, but okay, so then I was wondering too if Batman's high up on your list like
Mhm.
this, that does, because as anybody will say, even if you're doing something that you like, work is still work. So does excitement then kind of level out a little bit of like, oh man, how am I going to do this? Like stress of work, or did it always just kind of stay as like fun for you outside of you almost dying from sickness?
Well, I mean, um, fanboy, nerd, geek,
Yeah,
all of it. I am them.
yeah.
Writing Batman has been one of the great joys of my life. Writing comics has been one of the great joys. I'm a creative writing teacher,
Hmm.
where I teach kids, graphic novels and comic books, and I tell them
Awesome.
whether, whatever they're writing, poetry, prose, or comics, it's all work. It's always work, and you have to
Hmm.
look at it as work because it's all about the process.
Hmm.
So for me, it was fun during the process, but it was stressful because I was writing based on somebody else's work.
Yeah.
So even though my name is listed as, comics adaptation script, it's all the work that David Goyer and Christopher and Jonathan Nolan had done, in that. So I was trying to faithfully adapt it in a way that, honored the film and told a good story. So, but I mean, I'm the kind of guy when I'm writing comics, I sound out onomatopoeia.
Hmm.
I'm trying to figure out what does glass sound like being punched underwater. Pung, pung. Like I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's always fun.
Hmm.
If you don't enjoy it, if you find a creator who says they don't enjoy it, then you know, get
Yeah.
out. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, this is
Yeah.
this is it's a dream job, and I'm happy that I had the opportunity to do it.
I think it does become, and it's weird to say, I guess, but it does um become reflective of the work. I do honestly believe that of if someone if you just hated doing this adaptation, I do think in some way that comic readers and reading it somehow could pick up on it. You know, I do
Yeah.
believe that in some weird way. And I think all artists or writers or something, they just, I don't know if it's vibes are going through pages, but you can be like, it just doesn't feel like this is something up to what they usually do.
Yeah, and I had a good mentor in Chuck Dixon, um,
Hmm.
especially in terms of action
Batman
plot.
Legend.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chuck and friend for longer than I've been doing this. I mean, Chuck really helped to open the door for me at DC, and our collaborations were always a treat, always a joy, but always 50-50. I mean, he made me carry my water for everything that we did. But part of it is, like in looking at Chuck, I mean, he's a guy who doesn't run out of ideas, and he has spoken previously about how if somebody ever says they've run out of Batman ideas, then they don't know Batman.
Hmm.
Like there's a million things that you can do with Batman, and part of the process of writing comics is solving stories, solving problems in stories, and kind of reverse engineering a mystery or figuring out a plot. Writing yourself or your collaborator into a corner and daring them to find their way out. Like if Batman's falling off a building without a bat line, well, how does he get out of it?
Yeah.
And figuring that out is then showing the reader how cool it can be. Um, but it's work, I mean,
Hmm.
you'll bang your head against the wall trying to figure it out, and that's kind of the joy at the end is that you worked hard on it. So
Yeah.
for Batman Begins, it was like, how do I keep all the best parts of this story without taking away anything that is really crucial. And having not seen the film, it was kind of a guessing game, but I think I mostly did it.
Yeah.
So I think it stands up.
I think it's very faithful. I really do. And I don't feel like it's shortchanged. I've, gone on a mission of reading these Batman adaptations, more so because he is number one. But, this felt like those of like that, they couldn't do every single piece of the whole movie and original script in a comic book. So they just shorten scenes, hit the notes, and I think that this Begins adaptation did. And yeah, I think the art complements it and how well it does match, like comic art of the movie. That matched really well too. When did you get to see the final product?
Oh gosh. I think probably close to publication.
Okay.
I knew Killian had worked for Lucasfilm and had done some Star Wars stuff. So, I mean, he was really the right choice for doing faithful likenesses of the actors.
Hmm.
But it wasn't like the typical case when writing comics where you would get to see penciled pages and, kind of make changes because we had no time to make changes. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
when I was locked in, then Killian was locked in, and then, it had to be inked. And then again, too many people couldn't see it or else the threat of revealing it.
Yeah.
And I really think, Ryan, that's probably why we don't see a lot of comics adaptations of major films now. um,
I was going to
back,
ask you that.
yeah,
Just
back
if
in
you
the
had an idea of why, I guess, of maybe
well,
why.
I mean, back in the fall, when I knew James Gunn, who I'm a huge fan of.
Hmm.
I mean, uh, Guardians of the Galaxy is perfect. The trilogy is perfect. I mean, he made us care about CGI raccoon and
That is,
cry.
that is my example of like, so sci-fi is so I like my window is small on sci-fi. It just doesn't, I don't agree with it and it doesn't agree with me. So when I like it just got to hit me in the right mood or something. And everything about Guardians of the Galaxy is like that's sci-fi through and through.
Oh yeah,
And somehow he got me to where I enjoy all three movies and I like all three movies. Like I don't know how he did it, but he did
yeah.
it.
Yeah, Gunn's a guy that if I had an opportunity to have dinner with him, I'd be like, absolutely. I mean,
Uh-huh.
the needle drops in the films. I've been a lifelong fan of top 40 music
Yeah.
and classic rock. And I worked in radio for 7 years in college and grad school. And knowing that he goes into script writing, knowing the soundtrack or having kind of placeholders for the songs
Yeah.
appeals to me. His Suicide Squad was, I think, the first film that I got to see with my kids after lockdown or at the tail end of lockdown. I don't think I've laughed harder at a film in
That was great.
years. So I knew it was in the right hands. And so I reached out to DC and I said, hey, if anybody's doing an Ultimate Guide or a
Hmm.
comics adaptation, please let it be me. I mean,
Yeah.
who do I have to kill?
Yeah.
uh, and they're like, yeah, we don't know, we're not sure. And I know that there was something leaked today about a storybook, I believe, a children's book, because they had pages that kind of confirmed the relationship of a couple characters in the Superman film. But I
Okay.
think because these films are so close to the belt, especially with Gunn, because he's, producer, director, screenwriter,
Yeah.
and gets final cut. Just last week, I saw that they were trying to trim 15 minutes out of the film and maybe tone down some humor because the studio was feeling a little skittish. And I don't know if you can believe the internet or not, but I think because the films go right up to the wire in terms of just having everything set in stone before it's released to the theater, I can't imagine letting any part of that process out to other
True.
people, especially in the internet age
Yeah.
where leaks are.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it really.
I think that's it. Probably like the internet age of just too many opportunities of things leaking.
Yeah. And the
So,
toys too. I mean, of course,
yeah.
we've seen all the toys and we know that there's an abominable snowman, there's a baby kaiju and a full-grown kaiju
Yeah.
Metamorpho's baby kid who's, this little green critter, like
Yeah.
all of this stuff. It's so we kind of can piece together the plot, but uh,
Yeah.
I'm sure Gunn has so many secrets, that are just stashed away. But yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if comics the comics industry and comics publishers never get it right in terms of capitalizing on the success of the cinematic versions of these. Like,
Hmm.
why isn't there a kiosk to sell comics at the movie theater? Chuck Dixon has always said, why don't we have reprints at the checkout aisle of grocery stores like Archie? I
Hmm.
mean, the Archie universe has been kept alive for decades, probably past its expiration date, because mothers and fathers can buy little Archie digest and hand them to their kid to read in the car on a vacation trip or to get the phone out of their hands. Like,
Yeah.
why don't we have that at the grocery store? So, if there was cross marketing from the film to comics, I mean, we need commercials. Before, let's all go to the lobby or
Hmm.
have a Coke or the umpteen trailers, which I love. I mean, if I
Hmm.
miss the trailers, it's that's ruined the movie for me.
Yeah.
But why aren't there commercials for DC Comics or
Yeah.
Marvel Comics? It's like, hey, if you loved Endgame, then go read, the Infinity Gauntlet, graphic novels. We're not doing it. And so I don't feel like we're cross-pollinating between the movie
Yeah.
viewer and the kids and the, up to big kids like us who would, go out and buy that stuff and have it accessible, and in order to just, I don't know, ensure future generations understand the source material.
Great points. Multiple things to hit on of like what you said of you and Chuck. Denny O'Neil said that with the 89 adaptation, and it was like, no, this has to be for sale in the theaters when the movie comes out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that why isn't that just done? Because people love things. They genuinely do. And it's like if they're going to, so what's the next, is Superman the next superhero movie coming out? If there's a comic
Yeah,
in the
Superman and FF.
Okay, yeah, if they have a comic of that there in the theaters, like I don't see how kids and parents can just be like, sure, we can buy this. What is it, $5? And they'll get to have a book to take home. Like it just seems like a no-brainer to me. And because I also, at the time that this came out, I was still living in small town, small town. Our grocery store gave up on spinner racks. It was always behind anyway. I couldn't go and physically buy like issues of things anywhere near me, so I couldn't get the Batman Begins adaptation until it was included in the special edition DVD. That was when I was able to finally get my hands on it. So, and if the day that release day in the theater, if they would have had this, you bet I would have bought it because I immediately left the theater, went to the store and bought the video game adaptation. Like there is like, what begins can I get with the limited money that I have, And I would have definitely gotten this. So just to
Yeah,
like
I mean,
emphasize your point of like, I totally agree, and I think that that's a missed opportunity.
I'm of the spinner rack generation too. The drugstore, the corner news store,
Yeah.
on either side of me of my desk, two spinner racks.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
had three. My late mom worked at a bookstore, and she was able to secure them for me. And at some point in well, a few years ago, I was dumb, and I sold the third one at
Uh,
a flea market, far less than what it was worth, but it seemed to be taking up space that I didn't have.
are
But
you
going back to
rotating?
Yeah, the
Just really quick,
rotating.
are you
Yeah.
rotating what goes in the spinner racks or?
Well, the one on this side has stuff that I've written. The one on
Oh,
this
okay,
side is just all DC Bronze Age comics that I read as a kid. So
nice.
it's kind of like, the Muse and then, what it turned into, that sort of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, I do
awesome.
rotate it. I mean, because I try to keep them from, getting too much sun.
Yeah,
But going back to the theater, I mean,
sure.
honestly, a $4 comic book or a $5 comic book would probably be the cheapest thing that a family would walk away from the theater.
Yeah,
I mean, cheaper than
cheaper than their pop.
Sour Patch Kids or Mike and Ike's or any of that stuff, which are
Yeah.
$17. So kind of extending that after the theater when you're high on the characters and the experience,
Yep.
why not? You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Totally
maybe
agree.
DC's getting wind of it because I just found out that Dollar Tree has
Yeah.
the dollar comics and well, $1.25 comics.
Yeah. Dollar
And
25 comics.
of all the first issues, they have Batgirl Year One, and I think it's the oldest. No, I'm wrong. They have Grant Morrison's JLA, which is about 5 or 6 years into like the late '90s. So, but still, like we have two of the oldest comics there, in addition to all the Rebirth and the um, just trying to think whatever DC called the umpteen reboots.
Yeah.
But $1.25 comic. They're ads free except for the back, which is a DC ad. They're polybagged, but it's in kind of like that cellophane kind of polybag.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a 22-page story for $1. Get those cardboard kiosks at a movie theater and
Hmm.
see how fast they go.
Whoever works at a movie theater and is listening, come on, we're onto something here. I'm not saying it's gonna shoot them up to insane earnings, but it's not gonna hurt them. I don't see
Well,
how it hurt them at all.
I mean, DC marketing, Marvel marketing. I mean, for a long time, the uh, the general rule for any story arc in a comic was make it 4 to 6 issues because then it'll be collected as a trade paperback, and
Yeah.
that'll hit the book market because the book market is where they make their money back, not in the comics because fewer people buy comics than buy trade paperbacks. And at
Yeah.
the time in the early mid 90s, libraries loved graphic novels. And this is before Raina Telgemeier or, like any of the young adult comics got huge. Um, the librarians loved comics. They were the things that were most stolen and things never returned, and the items that had their covers worn off because they were taken out and used and abused so many times.
Wow.
It's the equivalent of the rolled up comic book, which
Yeah.
most collectors, it's anathema, but a rolled up comic was loved.
Yeah.
You kept it and you put it someplace so you could ride your bike.
Yeah. It just meant that like it was written to be enjoyed and it's being enjoyed, but then it's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're
Yeah.
ruining this thing that you're enjoying.
You know who got that? Randy Bowen, the sculptor who did all of those wonderful sculptures back in the '90s when like statues were just
Hmm.
all over the place. He did the first Wizard World Wizard Award, and his sculpture was a kid, baseball cap turned backwards, t-shirt, shorts, sneakers, and the comic book was rolled up in his back pocket. And I recall correctly, I think there was some debate at the Wizard offices about whether or not he should be holding and reading a comic or what. I think he is maybe reading a comic that he's that, but there's also one rolled up in the back pocket. But I think Randy got it that's what a comic book reader looked like.
Yeah.
That's really, and that would appeal to the people winning the awards.
It's one of those things of like, that's really cool. I could never do it.
Yeah.
Especially like now, I could never roll up a comic book, even if it is buying a reprint of something at Dollar Tree and I have it. I'm like, I can't roll it. I can't roll it up. I couldn't do that. Let's Batman Begins. So you go
Yeah.
and you see the movie,
Yes.
um, as well as you can remember. I totally understand. We're talking 20 years ago, but um, can you remember what it was like watching that for the first time, having been so like involved up to that point?
I was pleasantly surprised that I wasn't just I was seeing new things
Yeah,
throughout and
great.
seeing things that I had read the script, so I really had no idea like how to imagine it.
Hmm.
I wasn't sure like what I mean, Christian Bale's line reading, that has really become like how everyone thinks Batman, that I'm Batman, like
Yeah.
that hoarse, wreck your throat voice. But also then, his Bruce Wayne, suave,
Hmm.
Devil May Care. Like I think he really kind of captured that in a way that we had not seen before. We only had the campy Adam West, and Michael Keaton was brooding on both levels.
Yeah.
And then the other ones, it's kind of hard to like because just all the excess, the neon and the bat
Hmm.
nipples. So
Yeah.
my goal to say that as many times as I can tonight.
Yeah. Okay.
No. Um, but I mean, it was surprising to me because I was with a theater that had no idea, and just kind of looking around, like contrary to how Denny had reacted for Batman and Robin sinking into a seat, everyone was really engrossed, and I was engrossed
Mhm.
too. And my God, the production values, like
Yeah.
everything was just so beautiful. The stuff shot in the mountains, the battles, the fight sequences, the bat suit, and I think before they made it able for Christian Bale to turn his neck, just looked really good. Like there
Yeah.
was there was no warts, it was just all awesome. So I was happy because then I could finally talk about it.
Hmm. Yeah. I bet that in watching, were there moments of, oh, where's this or where's that, or not
Um,
necessarily?
no, not necessarily because again, because I was working from like a not final script, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if it was on pink paper or canary, is one of those like scripts that are designed to not be photocopied. Um, I was pleasantly surprised at the additions,
Yeah.
but then also, there was like lines of dialogue that were solid from the start. So, Michael Caine's Alfred,
Hmm.
very little deviation. The final line where, uh, Batman says to Commissioner Gordon, like I'll always be there, and or something like that, or you can always trust me, or something like that. I should have looked at it before we talked tonight, but that was there in addition to the Joker playing card that
Yeah.
is evidence, like kind of signaling that the Joker's coming up next. Yeah, like all of that. I mean, it would have been really cool to if the opportunity presented itself to write Dark Knight Rises or Dark Knight. I always mix
Dark
it up
Knight.
with
Yeah.
yeah, Dark Knight and then the third one. I'm not as big a fan of the Bane version. I think Bane works really well. I mean, he's not the comics Bane, but I mean, I don't know, there's a couple plot holes in the final arc of the trilogy that I don't know.
There's something with, so I can watch any of the Batman movies, even Batman and Robin. And it's just, and I think the reason why I got more forgiving or giving, just like sure whatever with Batman and Robin, is because we got Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and Dark Knight Rises. If we still hadn't gotten a Batman movie yet, I wouldn't be able to look at Batman and Robin because I'm like, you're the reason I don't have Batman. But we're good. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a kid who grew up um, in an era where we had three television channels. I mean, we had
mhm.
ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS, but grainy. And
Yeah,
then, I remember like being able to like tune in WPIX out of New York and WOR. And OR had Chiller Theater on Saturdays, and WPIX on weekdays had the Batman television show, and they would run an hour of it. So you usually got like the first and second
yeah,
part of each episode. So coming home from school, doing my paper route, I got to watch Batman. And my very first introduction to any DC hero was the Super Friends.
oh
So,
yeah, yeah,
so like having just those versions of it, and
yeah.
then when I came to the comics, I'm like, oh wait, this is serious now. And so having like the whole spectrum of just the different ways Batman and the superheroes were interpreted, like in my head, it all works.
Yeah.
Like even when Batman's fighting dinosaurs in the 1950s.
He's the
So
most malleable superhero, I think,
yeah,
out of
yeah. I
any
mean,
of them.
I don't hate any of them. I mean, the Brave and the Bold cartoon from was it the early
It
aughts?
was '08 to 12 or 13.
Okay. I mean, that's some of
Anyways.
my favorite stuff because it's very Silver Agey, but also very serious. And it's the Batman that I watched with my children.
Hmm.
So, and they loved it. So, I just, every Batman works for me. I
Sure.
can't think of any that I don't like. But as a serious Batman person
Yeah.
now, I mean, I can look back on Batman and Robin and think, wow, Chris O'Donnell was like 27 years old when he
Yeah.
was Robin.
Yeah.
And maybe Alicia Silverstone wasn't the best choice for Batgirl, and I totally didn't believe her as Alfred's niece. You
Yeah.
know, her Valley Girl, his Valley Girl niece.
Yeah.
So, it's still fun, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I was gonna say. And when it comes to like Dark Knight Rises, it's like that. I love Batman Begins. I love The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight's my favorite movie of all time. Not just my favorite Batman movie. It's my favorite movie. And then it's like I really, really like Dark Knight Rises. So it's like there's a slight like oof because of like when what you said. I do think that there are some things in that movie that's like ah. I mean,
Um, and they're so minor
but it's
compared to
okay. Whatever.
they're so minor. I mean, the
Yeah.
the Bane kidnapping from the plane in flight was great.
Yeah.
The action set pieces are all great. How Talia dies, her death scene
Oof.
is
Oof.
cringy.
Ah.
Yeah.
Might be
Bane's
the
death in the film. Sorry, spoilers, everyone. Uh,
yeah, it's okay.
when he gets shot by Catwoman on the
Pretty
bat
sudden.
pod, pretty sudden, but also not definitive.
Yeah.
Like as an audience, I'm like, was he is he really dead? Because we're not really sure. But so much cool stuff. I mean, the bat
Yeah.
pod, the flying tumbler later in the film. I mean,
And
it's
I mean, he might be to me like the best ending of the three. It's got the biggest almost like whoosh. And I remember it. I would tell my um fiance, she saw it with me, and I told her too at that point as it's ramping at the end. I'm like, I'm really nervous because it's like this is like my favorite interpretation of this character ever. Are they gonna kill him? Like, I don't want him to die, but I understand like the good message that could bring. And I was so nervous of that. And then when that music hits at the end, when Alfred sees him, and it's like, oh my gosh, and when he makes the jump to get out of the pit, and it's like, oh my gosh. It's like those are the moments of rises
oh
that are
yeah,
just like that those soar to
yeah.
where when there are Talia dying, like I can totally just be like, whatever, because there's so many high points in that movie.
Yeah, and I love Anne Hathaway as Catwoman.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed to admit that I've
Uh-oh.
seen them, but I haven't watched them with my kids. My kids have never seen them. And my son's in college and is an aspiring filmmaker, and my daughter is an aspiring visual effects artist.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
I mean,
It's
I should
time.
sit down and rescreen them because I'm sure that we'll have much to talk about with
Yeah.
all of them. But yeah, I mean, I, I, it's hard for me to not like anything really.
Yeah.
But my whole perspective on Batman, and I've compared this to like Kevin Smith and his I'm not sure if it's Cacophony or the Widening Gyre, where he has Batman say, my first night out, I peed myself.
Widening gyre.
Widening Gyre, okay. My I kind of treat these characters as sacrosanct. That my goal always was, and because that was sort of the rules at DC at the time, if you were, just a regular guy, I mean, Kevin's cult of personality means he can do things that the rest of us couldn't. Um, that it's a toy that when I put it back on the shelf, like when I hand it back over, it should still work.
Yeah.
Should be intact. That I've been able to play with it, but I didn't ever set out to like add anything new to the character as much as I wanted to tell a cool, fun story.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of fan service to the fan writer in
Sure.
writing the stories. And my only regret with any of it is that I wish I had created new villains, but I was happy to write the classics.
Yeah.
That was like, oh, I get to play with the Joker this month.
Hmm.
If I were smart, I'd have action figures based on characters I created, and maybe some extra money from that character appearing in a film or an animated
Yeah.
television episode. But part of for me was it was just wish fulfillment to be able to work in that sandbox.
Yeah.
So my I guess overriding principle for everything from Batman Begins to any other Bat story was I just want it to be good. You
Yeah.
know, I don't want to let myself down and I don't want to let the readers down. And happily, with like the year ones, and I think the Batman Begins, stands up to time that it's got an evergreen quality that
Hmm.
pull it off the shelf and it doesn't feel too dated,
Yeah.
and hopefully it still tells a good story. And that's at the end
Absolutely.
of the day, that's all it is. It's about the story and about
Yeah.
the audience. Everything
Yeah.
else is, cake.
I usually always have three questions at the end.
Yes, you've got a question?
So we can rapid fire these or spend as much time as you want on them. So, first off, do you thinking about it, does anything stand out? Like, what was the for you the toughest part, thing, element, anything at all to axe from your script from the movie script that you're
Oh
like, ah,
gosh.
I'd like this, but
Um,
I can't. It can't go in.
there's a lot of dialogue,
Yeah.
and a lot of those scenes had to be condensed. Um, I felt like the scene where they're talking about the condensed milk, and that
Hmm.
that was one of Bruce's favorite treats. And I thought it was weird, and maybe it was because I'm sure that came from the Nolan side. Maybe condensed milk is more of a treat on the other side of the pond, but it just seemed like something. Well, I felt like I had to include it, because I thought that it was going to have some sort of, callback later in the script. The Tumblr stuff was, like I said before, was really hard because that's a much longer action set piece in the film, and I think I boiled it down to, geez, I don't know, 3 pages, and that's a lot of real estate to
Yeah.
kind of give up to like something like a car chase, which works on film, but in a comic book, it's harder to do. And I think the thing that I remember at the time was I had to show the tumbler kind of like jetting off of, I don't know if it was the parking garage or something, like kind of blasting
Yeah.
through. Like in order for the next scene on the rooftop to make sense, it had to have like an airborne scene. And I think Killian drew it in a way that almost seemed to break the panel or maybe be coming at the reader. At the time, I think when I was writing script in comics, I was thinking about like stuff that came at the reader somehow, was a facsimile for 3D.
I can hold up to you the best of like that's
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
it.
at an
That's good.
angle a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah. And the police stop short and they're like,
Yep.
what's going
Whoa.
on? Yeah. But I remember just and seeing the film, it's like, wow, that scene was much longer. And again, you got to take, a long script and cut it
Yeah.
in half or more.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything else missing, but I think that I was having read the script before trying to cut it up, that I knew what the reveal was.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, how do I do this? Because I'm sure in the film it's set up in a way with some kind of clues, some kind of breadcrumbs for the audience, so that when it happens, that they know that that's what's happening. So I think I was trying to be cognizant of that, so it didn't feel like it came out of left field.
Gotcha.
So,
Um,
and I knew the Joker card had to be in the end. So
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, that I was spoiled on Ducard's identity and the Joker card before I got to see the movie because there was like an online leak and all that, and so I did see those two things, and I was like, "Gah, cool" on the Joker card part, but also like, "Gah." Um, you have a part that was maybe your favorite to adapt?
um, hmm. Yeah, absent of looking at it, I think anything involving the bats, kind of
Yeah,
like the iconography of Batman.
yeah.
The opening scene is kind of cool. Um, the the scene on the subway train, like that. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a really cool line of dialogue in the film. It's like, I don't have to save you. I mean, I'm not even sure. I'm trying to see. I know it's on my spinner rack someplace, but I don't know. You'll have to look at it to tell me. Do I have the line where he says, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you?
Nothing's changed, or he says, Roz says, "Have you finally learned to do what is necessary?" And Batman says, "Nothing's changed, Roz. I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you."
Okay,
And
good,
then
good.
does the bomb throw, and
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. Remember
yeah,
to mind your surroundings as much as your opponent. He says that, which
yeah,
obviously is not said in the movie, but gotcha. Cool. And
yeah.
then lastly, oh, so go ahead.
No,
Didn't
I
mean to
was
cut
just
you
going
off.
to say I think the scene that always bothered me was like burning down Wayne Manor. Like
Yeah.
that felt mean.
Just because like it's Wayne Manor and you
It's
don't want it
Wayne
burned down.
Manor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm with you. Uh-huh.
yeah.
It's like,
Like just
God dang. It's
yeah.
it's iconic. It's Wayne Manor. It needs to still stand. Uh, what about lastly here of a piece of Killian's art that when you think of your Batman Begins adaptation, that a piece of his art that like first image that kind of sticks to your mind or comes to
Um,
mind, I should say.
hmm. Sort of Batman swinging away on a jump line on the last page. I
Yeah.
mean, that sticks out. The likenesses are all really good. For some reason,
Yeah.
the child likenesses of young Bruce Wayne and Rachel stick in my head because it's in daylight, so it's easier to see. Um, like, I mean, I think Killian did a great job just rendering all of that stuff.
Hmm.
But I don't know why. For a long time in scripting, I was thinking about making everything widescreen. So that first page with the bats kind of like swooping in and everything. I mean, I know it's a wasted page. Nothing happens on it. It's not even an establishing shot. But for some reason, like if I had a piece of art from that book, and I was
Yeah.
dumb at the time, I never asked Killian for anything. I'm not sure if he was able to hold on to all of it because of the NDA. Um, but that's something that I'd frame, put on the wall, just because it's
For
bats. You know,
sure.
it's so,
Well, I
and
mean,
as I read the script, I mean, that's it. Looking at the script, I think that to me was trying to, and this was my first movie adaptation, trying to replicate what it would look like on screen.
yeah.
So I think that I went into it trying to just maybe trick the reader into thinking that they were watching a movie
Yeah.
with, the letterboxed, establishing shot, and then the zoom in, and then the title card at the bottom. So, yeah, that's
It's
one. It's a happy accident that I wasted a whole page on that instead of just jumping right into the action.
well, the iconography of it, of where a lot of people now, because Batman is as big as he is, maybe people would know from the first, but it's a very cool thing of looking at three panels, and by that third one, you're kind of like, oh, that's Batman.
Yeah.
Like, so, that is very cool, and I'm very much of, a question for a lot of the episodes, and asking someone is like, what's your favorite panel of whatever comic we're talking about? And I always say I'm always sucked in on one of, you don't need any context looking at it, and you can kind of just have your own story go on. And I think that it's in a similar vein. I think these three panels kind of do that too, where it's just like it's a moon, it's at night and there's some bats, and then it comes together. Oh, snap, it's Batman. Like, awesome. The red text at the bottom, did you know? Because even with these top three panels, it's a red background, and yet in the movie, it's got that like bronzy gold color. And they did, and I do know the red text color of Batman Begins. That's on the comic here. It was on a poster, and then maybe it was on the first trailer, I think. And then they did ditch the red coloring. Do you know
Hmm.
when, why, anything? It's such a small, like, um thing to ask about, but I mean, it's one for me that's, read and watched things so many times. Just
Yeah.
like,
I
I
mean,
really wonder when they changed that.
I don't recall, and again, I'd have to look to see if I even have any script pages. I'll dig around after we're done.
Yeah.
Um, I don't recall making any reference to color,
Okay.
because I think those are choices that they would have made in post production or something like that. Um, and maybe the images that they got from Warner Brothers had that look to it, but
Sure.
I think I
Yeah.
just said the logo.
Hmm.
But red, bats, vampires,
Yeah.
dusk. I mean, it all makes sense, but I don't know why they would change it, after the fact or later, unless they didn't want to have blood imagery for
Yeah.
some reason.
Well, then they picked it
It
back
is.
up for Pattinson's Batman. They
Yeah,
brought the
yeah.
red
Oh, yeah,
lettering back, so there we go, I guess.
yeah.
uh I mean, that's all I got, Scott. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I want to respect it.
Well,
Really
thank you.
look
I mean,
forward to
it's
this.
been a blast. I could talk about this stuff all day.
Oh, absolutely. You just said if you might go and look at that stuff. If you see anything, feel free to send my way.
Yeah.
I love looking at that stuff. Scripts. Tim Sheridan, he wrote the animated adaptation of The Long Halloween. And I was talking to him about it on here last year, and he said, I think I still have my scripts, including like a DC short, which was like the April Fool's chapter of The Long Halloween. If I find it, you want me to send it to you? And I'm like, yes. I love that stuff. I'm a dork for that stuff. And it was awesome. I read it and I was like, I don't know why they didn't make this, but I guess they didn't have the budget. But if you come across cool stuff like that, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I'd
absolutely.
love to look at it.
I
That's
mean,
awesome
I'll
stuff.
definitely post a link to this interview on my
Okay,
blog.
great. Yeah.
Starting during COVID, for a long time, I never published any of my scripts or any of the behind
Mhm.
the scenes stuff because I kind of thought that was showing how the hot dogs were made.
Yeah.
I need to keep the trade secrets, but
Yeah.
because I teach creative writing and I teach process, I thought it was really hypocritical of me not to share. So I have posted I have a handful of unproduced scripts that for whatever reason just never made it past scripting and getting paid for it. But I do have a trio of Batman scripts for the Legends of the Dark Knight online comic that DC did for a bit, for about half a minute.
Hmm.
And it was around the time when that we assumed that comics were going to be read on tablets more than anything else.
Yeah.
And so we actually, there was a tutorial that we had to go through as writers to kind of write to how to do half a page. And then the next part of the story is another half of the page as people scrolled down. And so I wrote an Ace the Bat Hound origin story, the revisionist
Ooh.
origin story that kind of, it goes back to my first Batman assignment, which was the Ultimate Guide.
Hmm.
And when DK did the schematic for the Batcave, the updated Batcave after Cataclysm and the earthquake that kind of razed Gotham City, they did this cutaway that's sort of like just a standard look at the side view of the Batcave, and it's like level 1, level 2, and then way, way down at the bottom of the shaft is like level 10, and
Hmm.
there's no 9 through 3. And I was like, for years, I'm like, well, what was in level 10? It wasn't established in the comics. It was just the whim of the DK designer, the graphic designer. And so I thought, well, hell, I'm going to put it in continuity.
Hmm.
So I wrote this Ace the Bat Hound story where Alfred goes down to the Batcave and, he's picking up the tray of food that Bruce never, ever eats any other time.
Yeah.
But there was a steak, and the steak bone is like gnawed. And so Alfred figures out that there's a prisoner being kept in level 10, and that prisoner is Ace the Bat Hound,
Nice.
who has been in my story, spoilers, was a kind of a dog that was trained by Hugo Strange to kill Batman. And so Batman
Oh,
takes possession of this dog and tries to break his conditioning. And so
nice.
it's one of a couple times in Batman stories where, Alfred goes to the Batcave and finds somebody tied up, like
Yeah.
Jason Todd or Ace, and Batman says, "I'm keeping him."
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, that's
Yeah,
good.
I'm thinking about posting them because it's they're past their expiration date. Ace has been reestablished, but they were cool stories. And Matthew Clark actually drew 2 pages of the one before the Legends book was canceled.
Hmm.
So they were bought and paid for. They just didn't make it to print. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
Ah,
so it's
man.
among the many things. So if I find any Batman Begins stuff, I'll link this interview.
I'd
And
love it.
post it.
Yeah.
So,
Ah, it's great. Yeah, I love hearing these stories. Great to actually ask someone who did the work and got to ask them directly. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed these stories. So again, I thank you for, agreeing to do this and sitting
oh,
down and talking for a bit.
thanks for letting me walk down
It's
memory
a,
lane. I mean,
yeah,
writing comics has been one of the best
yeah,
chapters of my lives, and writing Batman has been a joy. And I feel very grateful to all the people that helped enable, from my spouse to people like Chuck Dixon and Denny
mhm,
O'Neill, who I
yeah,
happily, well before Denny passed, I got to have lunch with him at a vegan Chinese place in Manhattan because Denny was a vegetarian. And it was when I wrote the Batman Day of Judgment one shot.
hmm,
And Denny trusted me to write that because it's magical. Um, it's a supernatural story, but Denny's rule was um, the Bat family can't be involved in the magic. Like they have to treat it like it's serious. And so the plot point is when all the dead are resurrected, some dead Gotham gangsters rise up out of Gotham Harbor, and they're wearing cement galoshes. They were killed, back in the day. And so
hmm,
they're zombie gangsters, but to the Bat family, they're like, what's going on? So Denny
yeah,
was very clear that the Bat family had to stay rooted in realism. And I
hmm.
think that's why, I never knew what Denny thought of Batman Begins, but I'm sure he was probably impressed.
He saw his influence for sure. Had
Yeah,
to have.
absolutely. I mean, finally he got to see his Batman on the
Yeah,
big screen, and I'm sure he was mightily impressed with the animated series because that was
yeah.
so much inspired by his work. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is there anything before we go that you'd like to plug to direct people to follow you anywhere, read what you're
If you,
writing?
yeah, everything that I do, I post on my blog. It's scottbeatty.blogspot.com. I'm working on a couple comics adjacent projects where I'm a contributor on stuff that goes way, way back to what I started with in comics without, I'm not breaking any NDAs,
Hmm.
but it's kind of too early to talk. But yeah, I've got a couple comics related things in the works. Probably both out early and mid 2026, and just living life and talking about comics to students, that I
Yeah.
teach, and trying to help the next generation, take over.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, there you go. Follow Scott there. Check him out. And again, sir, I thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.